Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Barnyards and Backyards Live, Season 4. Abby, can you believe that?
I cannot believe that. Yes, time flies.
I'm Jeff Edwards from the University of Wyoming, and my co-host today is Abby Perry. And we are talking with Rich Oakes, who is the Emergency Management Coordinator from Teton County. But before we get to that, a little housekeeping for those of you who are joining us. This year, we're taking questions through the Q&A feature in Zoom. So if you have a question for us, please type it in there, and then Abby or myself will bring it forward to Rich, and he can answer them directly. And for those of you who are on Facebook, please type your questions in the comment box, and Jenny will bring those forward, and we will get them asked of Richard. Our cohort and counterpart and keeper of the program is Jenny Thompson. She is also with us today. You probably won't see her, but she is the one that makes everything run as smooth as possible. So, Rich, without further ado, will you, if there's more that you would like to share about yourself, I'm going to turn the floor over to you and we'll start our conversation.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so like I said, Rich Oakes, emergency manager for Teton County, Wyoming, and I've been doing this for about 15 years now. Before that, I was a dispatcher for the sheriff's office here in Teton County. And before that, I worked for the Park Service and delivered pizzas for Domino's and did all the stuff that people in Jackson do to kind of
Make
survive.
ends meet.
Yeah, exactly. So I have a lot of experience. I know a lot of streets. I know the quickest way across town if you got to get a pizza somewhere, 20 minutes or less.
Well, as an
Yeah,
emergency manager, you should have that. You should
it's
have that skill.
it's very surprising how much of my experience at Domino's Pizza actually carries over to this job. I'm not even joking. Like it's just amazing. But yeah, so and I live here in Teton County. I love it, and yeah, and I love talking about how people could be better prepared for emergencies and disasters.
And so, how timely of a topic, right? I mean, the earthquake that has happened in Syria and Turkey, and it just amazing destruction. So, living in Wyoming, I feel that we're relatively safe, but we still have things that can affect us in our communities, and so that I think it's really important that we're talking with you today.
I agree, and Jeff, don't look behind you, but I think that you might have a couple
Well,
disasters
I,
pending right behind you. I
yeah,
see some funnel clouds.
I
Yeah,
might need to find a shelter.
there you go. But in all seriousness, along those lines, when we're talking about tornadoes and things, when you talk about being in Wyoming and us being relatively safe, um, I think the term relative is really important there, and it's important because uh, you have hazards and then there's risk, and until a hazard actually impacts some piece of infrastructure or a person or property or something like that, it's just a hazard. So a tornado in the middle of the woods is a tornado in the middle of the woods, right?
Right.
If we're using that timber and stuff for extraction, that is a cost to the community and to taxpayers and things like that. But it didn't really hurt anybody. And if you look, for instance, at when we plot tornadoes in the state of Wyoming, and you look at a map, it's no surprise that a very high percentage of them are along I-80, I-25, and I-90 because that's where the people are. It's not that
I
they're not
think
happening in the middle of the state. It's there's nobody's there to see them and report them.
right. I think I saw a presentation from Don Day, and he had like a target of incidences of tornadic activity in the state, and it all centers around LaGrange, Wyoming.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's something good to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that is very important to understand uh, what your risk is in where you are. And Wyoming is a big state, so there's a lot of variation between north and the south and the east and the west side of the state. And really, I want to kind of go over three things with everybody today: kind of know your risk, how to make a plan, and then something you can do to take action today. So those are the big three takeaways that I want people to have um, as we kind of go through this.
Fantastic.
So what I'll do, Jeff, if you're good with it, is I'll do a screen share here real quick. Let's see if we can get this figured out. And what I'm going to show folks, not that I want to show everybody my terrible typing, but I do want to show you how I'm getting to these places. So we're just going to type in the search bar, Wyoming Office of Homeland Security. And usually that'll come up. Oh, let's actually put this. Excuse my typing. I'm kind of typing one-handed. So usually it's the first result that'll come up is the Wyoming Office of Homeland Security. And they're essentially, as an emergency management coordinator, they're my parent organization.
Okay.
I work for the county, but I also work for the state. So we have multiple bosses, us emergency management coordinators. And probably the most important thing I would say for the listeners out there across Wyoming is if they have questions about their community and the history of disasters in their community, one resource is their local emergency management coordinator. And if you go to the homepage here and you just click on contacts, it says county contacts. The State Office of Homeland Security does a good job of keeping track of all of us coordinators because they have to know who we are. And you could kind of go through your county and you could find, you know, if you're in Albany County, Steph Baker is your emergency management coordinator. And they say, hey, get a hold of Steph. And there's their Facebook page. And the really cool part, and we'll get back to this a little later, is for each of them, they have a link that says sign up for emergency alerts. Pretty much every county in the state of Wyoming has some type of usually text, email, phone call, emergency notification system. And they are different from county to county. So that's why each of them have their own link. But find your county and click on that definitely. But also you could fire off an email to your emergency manager. You could give them a call. And if you have questions after this presentation, they're who you want to follow up with to get that detailed info.
I'll say last year here, I'm in Rawlins in Carbon County, and we had a low pressure water event, and being on that emergency alert system really helped with, you know, knowing what was going on and what we needed to do and when water was safe to drink again and just kind of staying in the loop. So I am like, yes, sign up for emergency alert information.
Abby, when you mean low pressure, do you mean no water available?
Yes, so that it happened so that the tanks completely drained, which means that then there was low pressure in the pipes, which means that it's not safe to drink. And so then we had a boil order notice. And so that is part of the information that went out across, and then kind of keeping us in the loop with that boil order and yeah, when things were safe again or what was happening, what people were working on. So also when you're talking about the natural disasters and being relatively safe, it's things like those, you know, water issues that you would never expect to be an issue. And, you know, it happens, it pops up. So.
And the opposite happened in Goshen County last year. We had a canal breach.
Yeah.
So those types of things do happen. We don't think that might happen, but they do.
They definitely do. So the other thing, you know, and kind of getting back to knowing your risk, like that anecdotal evidence. So talking with your neighbors, talking with friends, talking with people, or if you have lived in your community for a long time, sharing it with people that have just moved here, so they understand. You know, in Teton County, we have a very high risk of earthquakes. We also have a lot of folks that have moved here from outside of the area. They don't associate Wyoming with earthquakes. You associate California with earthquakes. And when they hear that that's a high risk, they're surprised. And you're like, well, that's how the mountains got here. And that's, so it's a risk. It hasn't happened. It's a hazard. Has not happened in a long time. But we're very active geologically, but it's not something you'd know unless you talk to somebody. And they'd be like, oh yeah, I felt an earthquake just last month or whatever. So some other resources we can look at, you know, talk to your local emergency management coordinator. One thing that you'll want to ask them as we're trying to learn our risks in our community is you're going to want to ask about a mitigation plan. So every county in the state has one, and we're just going to look at Teton. Sorry, my arm is in a splint, so my typing is absolutely horrific. I am sorry. So we're just going to go to Teton County's webpage. Every county displays their plan in a different way, so you really got to talk to your coordinator about it. But if, oh, that is tiny. There we go. So in Teton County, we post all of our plans that are publicly available. We have a little section that's called emergency plans. And the one that we would be looking for is this hazard mitigation plan. And the State Office of Homeland Security actually, in recent years, has started hiring a contractor to help all the counties across the state write hazard mitigation plans. And these are really important because what they do is they describe what hazards have occurred in your county, so a history of those hazards. They rate them, so relative risk of those hazards in your community, and then it gives a list of projects that the community can take to help mitigate against those hazards. So if we look at Teton County's plan, we can see that the hazards that our community looked at were dam failure, drought, earthquake, landslide, hail, flood, lightning, avalanche, tornado. And just a little bit of trivia for everybody. Jeff, do you know where the largest recorded tornado in the state of Wyoming was? I'm probably giving it away. I'm kind
of Teton County.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Teton County. It was an F4 in 1987. Wow. Yeah, but once again, kind of talking about hazard versus risk, right? Tornado is a hazard, but if it happens in the middle of the woods, it's not much of a risk, right? Ours happened in the middle of the woods. It was in the Yellowstone thoroughfare. Nobody saw it, and it just uprooted a lot of trees. And but Dr. Fujita himself, who invented the F scale of the tornado, actually wrote a paper on it and rated it as an F4. Yeah, so that's why we have tornado in here.
So the large fire that burned up Yellowstone in '88, did it follow the same path?
A lot of that did burn up during that, but you could still see places where the tornado has I mean, it's in places it's close to nearly a mile wide in places. It's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, it's huge. But Enos Lake, if anybody's been up in that area, is where, and then it went up into Yellowstone. Yeah. But in our plan here, we kind of see those are the hazards that are focused on. But if we look at a hazard, for instance, let's look at wildfire. So we're going to click on here. And it took us to tornado, but it'll give us a description of what tornadoes are. It'll kind of talk about some of the damage that can be, give you background on the type of disaster. And then, here's the history. So on July 21st, 1987, a rare high altitude tornado. And then, there's pictures and it shows where it went, and it went up to the Continental Divide and it came down the Continental Divide. Your mitigation plan for your county is going to have information on hazards and disasters and detailed information, like even ours has lists of snowstorms and blizzards that have happened in our community. So if you want to know how often these things occur, the mitigation plan is a great place to get that. And really, like I said, the plan's in two halves, but the first half is what I think everybody should check out because it's really going to give you some background on some of the things that you should be concerned about when you're trying to learn what your risk is. What is your actual risk? Living in your community.
So Rich, are these types of plans available for any county in the United States?
They can be. So it's one of the few plans. Yeah, it's one of the few plans that FEMA doesn't require, but if you want to apply for FEMA mitigation grant funds, you have to have a FEMA approved mitigation plan on file. So the state of Wyoming, the Wyoming Office of Homeland Security, really took the initiative to say, you know what, we want to make sure every county in Wyoming is eligible for those funds. And we also want to make sure that they all have a plan that meets the standards. So we're going to hire a contractor and they're going to go around in like a 5-year rotation. We have to update them at least once every 5 years. And then they kind of go through it. So yes, I would say most counties in the United States have one.
Can you
or some of them do them regionally too.
Okay. Can you say what the what FEMA stands for? Can you tell us?
It's the Federal Emergency Management Agency. So
perfect. Thank you.
When we're talking, please, thanks, Jeff. Throw something at me when I start talking acronyms. it's going to get worse, I swear.
Actually, that was a
So
little reminder that came from Jenny. So
yeah, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You know, you're talking to a FEMA person. So yeah, when we talk about the nesting of those agencies, you have your local emergency management office, which I'm a part of at the county level. Some towns, some municipalities in the state of Wyoming actually have emergency managers. Jeff and I were just talking. Torrington does, for example. Not many towns do, but some do. And then above us is Wyoming's Office of Homeland Security, and then under FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. So that's kind of how aid works, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, and also how organization of resources and deployments and resource requests kind of go through that chain of command as well during a disaster.
well, this is a really interesting resource.
Yeah, definitely check out the mitigation plan. The other thing, while we just got the web browser open here, I'm just going to go and I'm going to type in FEMA, R-A-P-T, WRAPT, which stands for, of course, it's an acronym. It's two acronyms together, so it's got to be good. It stands for Resilience Analysis and Planning Tool, because it can't be a thing with FEMA unless it's got an acronym. And what we're going to do is we're going to click here where it says access the resilience analysis and planning tool. It gives us a warning box. I just click OK. If it's the government, it must be fine.
You're so trusting.
So if they don't have everything on me already at this point in my career, there's nothing else new they're going to get.
Right.
So we're going to let this load here. But if people look at this is going to be familiar looking, like a kind of a GIS interface, or like a Google Maps, Google Earth kind of an interface here. And of course, we get another screen where I've got to tell FEMA something's okay. And what we're going to do is this is a pretty cool tool. So FEMA has come out with this because they want to help people understand their risk. And they want to give them tools. And there's a lot of publicly available data all over the internet. And what FEMA is trying to do with this tool is bring it all into one place where it's been vetted and verified. So we're going to get a look at, I'm going to zoom in here. We're going to look at Wyoming here. And so what we could do is we could click on different counties. So if we see Sublette County here, it'll give us really quick county population data. So this is all from the census. This isn't FEMA's data. This is U.S. Census data. It gives us some indicators, some demographic indicators. So how many folks are 65 and over? So that's a really important planning tool for an emergency manager. What is the age of our population? How many folks are in mobile homes? How many people are in owner-occupied housing, especially when we have a disaster? That's a very important question, because FEMA, when we talk about assistance a little later, they don't help with non-primary residences. So if it's a second home or a third home or a fourth home, if you live in Teton County, those things are not covered or not taken into account when FEMA does damage assessments.
Interesting.
So they're looking at primary residences. So they're really looking to help people who live in a home and that are, and that are directly impacted by that. So we see all sorts of great stuff there. But if we go up here to the upper right, we've got a bunch of stuff here. We have a legend, we have infrastructure. So we can look at where are our hospitals. And it's going to pop up a thing, and we notice Wyoming is very sparse with hospitals. And that's that. And Sublette County, I think one of the only counties in the lower 48 that does not have a hospital.
Wow.
So when we look through this, other things, maybe we want to know where our nearest fire station is. Maybe we're trying to plan, or we're working with our insurance company on wildland fire insurance, and we need to be able to figure out where's the closest fire station to our home. And maybe we'll just zoom in and see. It looks like it's zooming us into Rawlins somewhere. Okay, it looks like we've got 3 fire stations there in Rawlins potentially. So that information can be really useful. And then, other stuff like, this is a good one too. So if we zoom out here a little bit, we can look at high hazard dams. So if you have an impoundment or something on your property, and it's classified as a high hazard dam because folks are There's people downstream, and it could potentially impact lives of people downstream. We could see, let's zoom into Fremont County, and we could see that there's some high hazard dams, over on Ocean Lake. We could see the dam there. We could see the dam over here near Morton, and that could be important information for you. So it's got a lot of infrastructure information, which is really useful and kind of aha type of stuff. But where it really comes into play,
The aha kind of stuff like, well, I really shouldn't be living here, or I need to move, or
well, there's risk no matter. I don't think you can find a place where there isn't risk. It's just, is the
okay.
risk acceptable to you?
That
So
that was something in when you were showing the plan for Teton County, and I was looking at some of the things there, like winter storms, and it's like, oh yeah, that is a hazard, isn't it? But things
And-
that we just sort of take for granted, and you're taught to plan for since you're a little kid. But as people who are maybe moving to the area or new to it, that's a hazard that they haven't maybe been brought up
Mhm.
training for.
Oh,
Abby, if you don't like
yeah.
how, I'm sorry, if you don't like
No, go
how
ahead, Jeff.
White Rollins has been
Right.
this winter, you really would not like where Rich is at.
Yeah.
Right.
And Abby, you bring up a great point. And it is all relative, right? So when we look at winter storms, we do list it as a hazard in our plan. However, the way our community perceives a winter storm is very different than how other communities, I would say, even in the state of Wyoming or definitely across the country, perceive winter storms. Like when a winter storm warning comes out, and I, as we were talking earlier, I'm originally from New Jersey, and I moved out here in '99. But growing up, if there was a winter storm warning, everything shut down. That was the end of the world. You went to the store, you stocked up on bread and eggs, and cleared out the shelves, and you hunkered down. When we get a winter storm warning here, people are like waxing their skis and getting ready to go. Like they're like, fantastic. Like this is
It's all
great.
your
And
perspective, right?
Yep.
it is. And as a community, we hire plow drivers and we have extra plows in the winter. Like we know it's coming every winter. It's not like there might be a winter where there isn't snow that has to be plowed. So it's like so the infrastructure is built for it. And most communities in Wyoming are, but we still get hit by stuff that'll totally knock us out. And we have to know about those extreme events, right? Because then it becomes it becomes that warning fatigue, right? If you get the 15th
Yep.
winter storm warning of the winter, you're like, not even going to read it. But this one
Yep.
says, oh no, you're actually getting 3 feet of snow in the valley. And it's like, well, that's a big deal.
Yep.
But you've gotten so many before that you're just worn out. We have to be really careful with that stuff sometimes
Right.
in communicating to the public. But as we look here, when we look at our hazards, our little rain cloud here, what I would say, like some really important ones here, I'm going to try to zoom out here on the screen here.
So the one that's here listed as seismic hazards, is that where you're going next?
Yeah, let's hit it and
Okay.
just see what pops up here. So if we do seismic hazard, once again, if we look across the state of Wyoming, everybody's pretty good except the Lincoln County, or Lincoln, Teton, and Park County. It's who we have considerable risk for. And of course, we have Yellowstone National Park. We have the Teton Fault. We have the Hoback Fault that both run through Teton County. We have the Grand Valley Fault System in Lincoln County. So these are faults that can produce over a 7.0 magnitude earthquake. And so very high hazard. But then as we move east, we see if I'm over in your neck of the woods, Jeff, I'm not really worried about earthquakes. So when we're talking about knowing your risk, it's what do I need to prepare for? If I'm in Teton County and Lincoln County, I want to be prepared for earthquakes. I want to know about how do I secure my water heater in my home. I want to know whether I am built up to the seismic codes that are necessary. But not so
Make
much
sure
out.
all your bookshelves are attached to the walls.
Yes. The big object, and know what to do. No drop cover, hold on, like know those things. So then, but the other thing, let's turn that off and let's get a look at we could look at wildfires, so we could see history of wildfires. And this is not completely populating here, but let's do perimeters. And oh, this is only current. I'm sorry. So these are current, not historic. Oh, let's look at historic tornado tracks though. That could be interesting. So now we start to look at this, and we could see that Teton tornado right here. So here's that F4 in Teton County, heading up into Park County. But then if we head down to your neck of the woods, Jeff, we could see that there was one big one. We got one big one up in Teton County, but we got a lot more. We got a lot more down here. So I would be concerned about tornadoes if I was in Torrington. You know, these are things, and you could click on these lines, I believe. They'll tell us when it occurred, the magnitude, time of day, which is incredibly important. As we all know, tornadoes at night are much more dangerous than tornadoes during the day. So yeah, it's this is really, really interesting info that you could go through here. Live stream gauges, things like that. We could look at other demographic information. This is a tool that if you've got time to burn on a Sunday and nothing else to do, and you want to scare the crap out of yourself, you could bring this up and you could look at all of these terrible, terrible things that could happen to you. But yeah, it's kind
Activities
of
to do at a party with all your friends.
There you go. If you've got an internet connection and you could show them, but I would say that it's definitely it's one of those things. I think information is power. Like I don't think this is scary information. You know, I think for younger kids and stuff, you have to present it in the right way.
Yeah.
But for adults, like if you move to like, I wouldn't have known this before becoming an emergency manager, but if I ever moved to another community, before I bought property anywhere, the first thing I'm going to do is ask to see their mitigation plan, because I want to know what is the history of hazards there? What has happened in the community? You know, is my home being built on a landslide path? Because
Yeah.
we can't always trust, we can't trust the code. We can't trust the codes all the time. Codes will save us. Like, so building codes, fire codes, those are the things that are saving more lives than cops or firefighters or EMTs or anything. It's the work that we do ahead of time to our property to prepare that's really saving lives. Large scale across the country. But that's not the case in every community. So every community doesn't have the same codes. Every community doesn't have the same level of enforcement, things like that. So you really have to be an educated consumer when you do stuff like that.
Seems that the folks who are when you're looking at a community to move to, that the realtors should provide you that information or a link to it, or did I just open a can of worms?
That can be. I mean, it's a great point, Jeff. Like it is a big can of worms. So on the one hand, you have folks that are trying to sell or you know, or making a commission off of the exchange of property. And what would slow that down? Telling everybody everything that could possibly be wrong with going through with this deal.
True.
However, I do feel I have seen, I believe it's on, oh man, don't quote me on this, but I think Zillow now is actually showing, is overlaying with FEMA's flood maps. So you'll see there's something called FIRM maps, flood insurance rate maps, another acronym. That's how it's determined whether or not you are required to buy flood insurance. If your property is within certain flood zones, if you have a federally backed mortgage, you have to purchase flood insurance, and the firm maps determine that. So Zillow is starting to take that into account, and they're actually offering risk ratings and stuff on properties. So whether realtors themselves are doing it, or some of these online companies that are helping folks find properties and things like that are taking it into account, because like as we saw in that wrapped tool, all that data, all those layers, that's publicly available government data. Anybody can take that data and use it to help educate people better. So once again, I don't think it's going to dissuade somebody necessarily from purchasing a property or something, but now they know what they're getting into. They know that maybe I need to do some wildfire mitigation on my property because there's a history of a lot of wildfires in this area. Or maybe I need to elevate my home above the base flood elevation so I don't have to worry about this in the future. And it's not somebody coming back to you as a realtor 2-3 years down the road and say, my house flooded, and then I talked to the neighbor and they told me that it flooded 5 times before I bought it. And it's like, why didn't you tell me? So I think there's a lot of disclosure, and I do think that we are seeing realtors definitely like disclosing that information and getting that out there.
So Rich, Gwen has put in a comment. She's thanking us
Oh.
for these important links and resources that she greatly appreciates it. So yeah,
great.
it's very useful information. And I can see burning a lot of time on that Wrapped website.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've spent, yeah, that'll take you down a rabbit hole. Yeah, it's now the one thing I will caution you with the RAP data, and this is a big problem for Wyoming, and this is with any data that we gather for our state specifically, is a lot of the stuff in Wrapped and a lot of the stuff that you pull from census and things like that is typically done at the county level. And when you go back east and the counties are small, that's fine. But here, our counties are huge. Some of our counties are the size of states back east.
Right.
And the problem is that the resolution of that data, like when you give demographic information for an entire county, and you have maybe 6 or 7 municipalities within that county, it's not always representative of the entire place. So you just have to be careful, and you understand the limitations of the data when you look at that stuff.
Perfect. So what's next? I know we have 3
Yeah.
points that you'd like
So
to
the
get
next
through.
thing I want folks to do is I want them to make a plan. So figure out what your risk is, and then now let's kind of work on putting a plan together. One of the things I want to talk about real quick is disaster assistance, and the reason I want to talk about that is because um, knowing how disaster assistance works might motivate you to make a plan for yourself.
Okay.
So the United States, we have a very robust disaster assistance program, probably one of the best in the world. But it is not a substitute for insurance. It is not something that is designed to make people whole after they've been impacted by a disaster. So everybody knows that there is FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency assistance following some disasters. So there's 2 big programs that you'll hear about if you've ever been through a disaster. One is called Public Assistance, PA, and the other one's called Individual Assistance, IA. Now, public assistance is what governments and some nonprofit utilities like co-ops and stuff, that's what they get following a disaster to rebuild infrastructure. So you would think if you hear your community is qualifying for FEMA public assistance, you're like, hey, I'm a member of the public, I'm going to get assistance. You are, but indirectly. Your roads might get fixed, if they are public roads. Your utilities might get fixed. If they're a co-op, if they're a private utility, they don't qualify for public assistance. And the local government will usually be reimbursed about 75% for emergency response. So like if as an emergency manager in Teton County, I had to stand up a shelter and we had 100 people staying there for a week and we had to feed them and all that other stuff, all the money that the county put out for that, if we qualified for a FEMA disaster declaration, we could get some of that reimbursed. That's the public assistance side. Typically, in Wyoming, there's a certain threshold we have to meet in order to get there. So we have to have a presidentially declared disaster, which doesn't happen very often in Wyoming.
Wow. Huh. Okay.
And if it does, we have to meet a threshold of damage to our infrastructure before we even qualify for that. And typically in Wyoming, it's $1 million. So the threshold is pretty low because our per capita is very low. And that amount changes, depends on the year and the population, everything. So, so there's a lot of hoops we got to jump through to get that. But public assistance is the easier one to get. Individual assistance, which is what would come out to me as an individual. So if I lost my property or something like that, that's the assistance coming to individuals and families. That's a much harder threshold for us to meet in Wyoming because we're so sparsely populated. FEMA does not, they don't have a threshold per se. There's nothing in writing or in Code of Federal Regulation, but typically we still have to have that presidential disaster declaration. But you're looking at quite a few properties and homes lost. So you're probably looking in the neighborhood of 200 or more primary uninsured residences lost. So once again, primary homes. So secondary homes don't count. Vacation homes don't count.
And uninsured.
Uninsured, yeah.
Okay.
So it's a hard. So even if your community is unfortunately struck by a disaster and there's 200 homes lost, if they're not all uninsured and they're not all primary residences,
You haven't
and I'm
met
not
this
saying
threshold.
200 is the magic number, but that's the range that we typically see in the Western
Sure.
United States.
Mhm.
And so it doesn't come very often. And even when it does come, I think right now, if I'm not mistaken, the maximum amount that an individual can qualify for is, and this is if you check all the boxes and you're in probably pretty poor financial straits before the disaster struck. You're looking at about $37,000 total benefits in cash, and then $37,000 in non-tangible benefits. So that's not going to fix your home. That's not going to build you a new home.
Yeah.
So it's there to help you along. It's there to get you to the next step. It's there. So FEMA's disaster programs, there's a purpose for them. The purpose isn't to get you back to where you were before the disaster. The purpose is to get you to that next step.
So
So
being
the reason,
prepared,
yeah,
I'm sorry, being prepared includes having insurance.
yeah, financial preparedness, I would
Yeah.
say more than anything else. And we've seen it time and time again. And it's a misunderstanding, I think, among the public that these FEMA programs will open up. Like, what is a big disaster to us here in Wyoming? It's a blip compared to some national disasters. And it
Sure.
doesn't take, like, like we could have 10 homes destroyed by a flood, and that doesn't even make the radar on the national scene, but that could wipe out an entire town
Yeah.
in Wyoming. And that's a big deal. And so just understanding that insurance is your first resort. So being properly understanding your risk, and then going to your insurance agent and talking to them about those risks and being like, am I protected from this? Like, if am I protected from flood? And if not, what would it take to get me there? And then having to weigh that, is this something that's worth the money for the amount of the relative risk of a flood occurring? Do I need earthquake insurance? FYI, yes, you do. That's not included with standard policy. That's a rider that's on top of that. So
Yeah.
I have a renter's insurance policy, and I have an earthquake rider, and because of where I live. And as a bonus, with the earthquake rider, I also have included volcano insurance. So if Yellowstone goes off,
You're good.
I'll be able to get a new TV. Yeah, yeah. So that's what I'm fingers crossed. Yeah, I can upgrade to that 60-inch. So, but yeah, so understanding your risk, having the proper insurance, talking to your insurance agent about these things, and reviewing it on a regular basis. I mean, I would say at least annually. It's so easy to just check the box and just renew your insurance every year, but really talking to them about these things is really important, because these programs, and FEMA is only one program. So other programs that folks should know about following a disaster. Usually the first agency to come into town to offer assistance if there's a presidential disaster declaration isn't FEMA. It's actually the Small Business Administration. They've been tasked by the federal government, and in the National Disaster Response Framework, they provide low interest loans to homeowners and businesses following a disaster. So they administer disaster loan programs, and their threshold to be activated is much lower than FEMA's individual assistance program. So usually you'll hear about the Small Business Administration coming into town to help out. So the one thing I want folks to know is, don't think, well, I don't own a business, so this doesn't apply to me. Doesn't matter if you own a business. They just administer the program. So if you need a loan to rebuild your home, super low interest, great terms, that's what you want, and you want to keep your ears open for that, because that could actually end up helping you quite a bit, because it could help bridge the gap with insurance as well.
Yeah, just by the name alone, you would think, oh, I wouldn't qualify for that, so why bother?
I don't have a business. So, and then the other big one for the viewers and the listeners and everything else, USDA. So they have a totally separate disaster declaration program. So when I'm talking about FEMA and individual assistance and public assistance, that's a presidential Stafford Act disaster declaration. But the Secretary of Agriculture can declare agricultural disasters. Now, they don't always happen when we have presidential disasters. But they do overlap a lot of times. So if there is a presidential disaster declaration, usually the Secretary of Agriculture will also declare a disaster for that area.
Okay.
But more often than not, especially with the drought that we've been seeing recently,
Mhm.
and even with floods and things like that, I see quite a few of these come across from USDA. So really getting to know your farm service agency and the farm service agent, that's who administers those programs. Those are typically activated by district, region. I'm not sure how. Yes, there we go. That's the link. And but that's another one to kind of keep an eye out for, especially if you're a ag producer, things like that, because there's a lot of USDA programs out there. I'm not even remotely familiar with a lot of them, but I know you want to talk to your farm service agent, because
Sure.
they can help you out with that.
Sure. Rich, just to jump back and emphasize your point about insurance reviews. My wife and I just went through a review this last year, and things change, right? So things change that you might not be aware of on your policy. And our agent was actually able to tweak some things, and we were paying less now and getting more coverage. So
Yeah.
it's worth it to go in and see if things have changed for you.
I was going to say something kind of along the same lines of, we did insurance review last year, and instead of just like, yeah, keeping the same plan, but just the cost of building materials have gone up. And so, that if your home is destroyed, being able to replace it, it's, you want to make sure that that coverage amount is still falls under all of
Adequate.
that with adequate. Thank you. With all of the changes to building supplies.
And that is a fantastic point, Abby, and something to bring up. And we saw this. I was down in Sublette County in 2018, 19. I don't know. It's before COVID, so it's all a blur. For the Roosevelt fire, which was one of the most destructive wildfires in the state of Wyoming's history, and the Hoback Ranches area, very rural community. No county government roads or anything down there, so all improvement service district type of deal. Everybody's on their own water septic, and a lot of people were building homes down there. And really, if you are building your own home, please talk to your bank, talk to whoever you got your loan through, and then talk to your insurance company. How you insure building materials and how you insure a home under construction is very different than how a home is insured. And you fall into this kind of gray area with FEMA, even if there is individual assistance, or if Small Business Administration comes in with loans, you fall into this kind of gray area because the home isn't quite built. Nobody's living there yet. But you're planning on living there, and you've put everything, you're living with your family while you're building your house, and everything you own is in those building materials and stuff, and a wildfire comes through. So definitely talk. There's a lot of intricacies there that I'm not even completely familiar with, but definitely talk to your insurance agent, your bank about that, to see how you're protected, or what you need to do to protect yourself there.
Okay. Well, I kind of derailed the conversation. What else do we need to know to have about it? Or no?
Man, what else do you need to know to make a plan? So
Yes.
what I'm going to show, what I'll show you really quick is we'll pop open our screen share here again real fast. A couple of resources that we're going to check out here. If I can get rid of this. Hide floating meeting controls. There we go. So we're going to head over to ready.gov. It's an easy one to remember. So this is the Federal Emergency Management Agency's website for just general preparedness, and we could see that they have a list of disasters, so we could learn what we need to do to help prepare for drought. So before a drought, during, associated content, tips on water conservation, outdoor water conservation, things like that. So all that great stuff. So we could look up those different hazards and what we want to put into our plan. But then they have a make a plan section, and it has information on low cost preparedness, how to build a kit, financial preparedness, which is a lot of what we just kind of talked about. Folks with disabilities, what are some special things for that? So if we look for plan for locations, we could see how to make plans for the workplace, for the home, and things like that. And they actually have a plan kit that you could kind of use to put together. So it gives you simple step-by-step what you need to do. And then you can make your family emergency plan in a very simple, fillable form. So you fill all this stuff out. And then it's going to essentially turn it into a little PDF document that you can then share with everybody in your family, so they have this information. So what I will say is that, well, whether you want to trust the government or not is your choice. You hit submit form, they swear on multiple levels. They're like, we are not collecting your information or your data. We're literally just taking it from this form and putting it into a PDF that you could print out so you could share with your family. I trust them. But whether you want to trust them or not, you could easily just do the same thing in your own Word document and not do it on FEMA's website. But things like family members' phone numbers, man, if I lost my cell phone right now, like we had a disaster or it went dead, battery went dead, and somebody, I was like, oh, I got to call, I got to call my family or I got to call somebody, and somebody handed me their phone. They're like, here, use my phone. I'd be like, okay, do you have my mom's phone number in there? Because I don't know. I
gotta
don't
push
know what it
buttons.
is. Yeah, I was like, I know my childhood phone number growing up, and I know the phone number of the emergency management coordinator down Sublette County because he calls me all the time. And I said, that's it. Those are the only two numbers I know. I was like, so one of those two are going to get a call. But yeah, just writing that stuff down and having everybody have that information is incredibly important. And I would say the thing, especially in your plan, as you kind of add this information in here, really the two things that we want to have. You want to have a contact, have an out-of-state preferably an out-of-state contact for your family. And the reason this is really important is following a disaster, the first thing everybody's going to do, if there's an emergency in your community, the first thing everyone's going to do is they're going to try to call their loved ones. So if it happens in the middle of a work day, mom and dad are at two different places at work, the kids are at two different schools, of course, everybody's got a cell phone, right? So everybody's trying to call each other to check in with each other. And that uses local cell towers and it uses local phone circuits. The long distance circuits are different than our local phone circuits when we look at our telecommunication network across the country. So if local circuits get overloaded and you get this call can't be completed as dialed, I'm sure a lot of people in Wyoming are familiar with that. It happens quite a bit around here. Sometimes when you can't make a local call, you will be able to successfully make a long distance call. Okay, so people usually aren't calling long distance following the disaster. So the idea is let's say you've got Aunt June and she lives in Kansas. You tell Aunt June ahead of time. You're like, hey, Aunt June, we're going to make you our family's emergency contact. If something happens to us, I'm going to have the kids and husband and my wife and all. They're all going to call you and just check in and say whether they're okay or not and where they're at. And you're just going to play telephone switchboard, right? You're just going to relay information back and forth. So the first thing you do when a disaster hits, you call Aunt June in Kansas. Hey, Aunt June, I'm at school. I'm okay. The teacher said they're going to keep us here until 5 o'clock. They said we're fine. I'm good. And then everybody, and they're like, oh, okay, well, your mom just called in. She said that she's stuck at work and all this other stuff. So, that's really important. And that's a really simple thing that you could put into your plan, and a take action thing that you could do this afternoon is just figure out who that out of state contact is. So that make a plan is really useful. And then another resource that could be helpful, if we go back to the Wyoming Office of Homeland Security's website, they have something here. So we'll go to the top here, Wyoming Office of Homeland Security. They got this thing, Wyoming Ready. And the State Office of Homeland Security has put together this app. So if you're an app person, that you could get on Google or Android on your phone, and you could make a really quick plan on your cell phone. So it asks you the question. So it's kind of in a question, kind of a quiz format. You answer the questions there, and it puts together a really complete plan. I like it in that it puts together the plan for you. What I don't like, it's not easy to share with other people in your family. So I tend to use the ready.gov form because it just makes a PDF that I could then share with other people in my family. The app, everybody would have to like type the same information. And if you update something, they don't have it updated in theirs. And if you're an individual making a plan, the Wyoming Ready is a really good tool. If you're making something you need to share with other people, and a plan that isn't shared with everybody in your family is kind of useless. If you're the only person who knows what the plan is, it's not really going to help anybody else. So sharing the plan is probably the most important thing. So really figure out what your risk is, talk to your insurance agent, go to ready.gov, fill this information out, put something together, even if it seems really simple and stupid. It'll start the conversation with your family. You'll be really surprised. Involve your kids. Like, have them go through this as a thought exercise of, well, what happens if we were separated? You know, you don't even have to talk about the specific disaster because it could be anything. What happens if we were separated? Where would you go? What would you do? What if we couldn't get back to our house because we were evacuated and we couldn't call each other? Where would we meet? You know, things like that. And then let everybody answer and realize that everybody just gave a different answer and be like, okay, this is why we need to write this down. We're all going to meet at the grocery store. Like, this is the place we're going to meet.
Well, and
Yeah.
I'd say even those conversations, and my son was in kindergarten. He accidentally, I don't know how it happened, got off the bus and was home and home alone. And it sparked conversation about whether or not you should stay at home and wait, or whether or not you're supposed to go there, or neighbors that you can talk to. And also, the same son is now he goes to Boys and Girls Club, and they were talking last summer about how many of the kids that don't know their parents' phone number. And so just some of those simple things, the same thing that you're saying about, I don't know anybody's number because it's in my cell phone. They're not,
Nope.
you know, they don't have the house phone at home that they're dialing and calling
Oh,
people,
yeah.
and they don't know people's numbers either. So
Yeah,
yeah,
we're more
really
connected,
basic.
but we're less connected. It's
Yeah.
very weird.
Yeah.
As long as we got that device tied to us, we're good. And
Yeah.
it's working, you know. But like printing this out, folding it up, putting it in an envelope in your kid's backpack, you know, that's now their emergency plan, and they have the contact info, or their teachers could have it if they need it. I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
So put your plan together. So the last thing I want to talk about is taking action. So what are some things that we could do to take action? And if I'm not making everybody seasick, I'm going to keep my share screen up here. And what we're going to look at, there's 3 things in Wyoming that I think you really need to know about, care about. So your local emergencies we talked about. So if we go back to our Homeland Security page, everybody remembers we go to contacts and we look at county contacts. We could learn how in our county to sign up for our local emergency alert system. So if we scroll down to Teton County, there we go. So we can sign up for emergency alerts, and we click on that, and it's going to open. We use a system called Nixle. So not every community, some use Code Red, there's a bunch of different brands, they all do the same thing. But then if you wanted to sign up, you just click there to sign up, right? So that's the first thing. I want everybody to, as a take action thing, to make sure that you're signed up for your local alerts. Kind of like Abby was saying, we had a utility outage. We had some of the lowest recorded temperatures 2 weeks ago now. So it was Sunday, last Sunday. We were getting to negative 27 degrees, negative 35 with wind chill overnight. And that morning, Sunday morning, we lost power to half of the town of Jackson. So a lot of people here are primary electric heat. So houses got cold quick. We had a senior living facility that was within that area. We had people that are on medical devices, oxygen concentrators, things like that. We had to communicate to the community and tell them. So the power company was telling us what their estimates were, or that they didn't have an estimate for when power was going to come back on, but they told us what the problem was. We communicated that out. We could actually look at here's the messages that we sent. why talk about it when I can show you? So we could see that after the power was turned back on, LVE, Lower Valley Energy, once again, another acronym, sorry. But I only have so many characters in the text messages that I send, so we sometimes have to use acronyms there. But Lower Valley was actually asking customers to reduce power consumption because every time they brought the power back on, it was tripping a fuse because everybody's water heater and heater was turning on at the same time. So without a text and email notification system to the public, we wouldn't have been able to get that information out to folks so that they could help mitigate some of these issues so we could get power on faster for the entire community. So it's really important to sign up for your local emergency alerts, and you've got them all listed in one place. I don't know any other state that does that. So Wyoming Office of Homeland Security does a great job with that. The other thing that you want to know about are road closures. We all live in Wyoming and we all have to travel long distances. And I'm sure, Jeff, you've got to drive back to the mothership maybe in Laramie every once in a while. And
Occasionally.
yeah. So what I'm going to show you here, this is wyoroad.info, and everybody from Wyoming probably knows about this website, right? This is where you see the map. You see, well, what section of I-80 is closed today? Like that's where you go.
Yeah, or still closed this week.
It's still exactly, and that's all really important stuff. But what I want to show you is instead of having to go back to the website, what we really recommend is 511 Notify. So if you scroll down, you click on this. If you're not already signed up, this is a text message and email notification system by WYDOT. And especially in our community in Teton County, we have very few high volume critical county roads or town roads. Most of our critical arteries are state highways, and they're managed by WYDOT. So they're open and closed by WYDOT. And what we want to do is we want people to get that information straight from the horse's mouth. So how can we eliminate the middleman? We get them right to WYDOT, and 511 Notify is the way to do it. The cool part about 511 Notify is that you can sign up for just the stuff you care about. So if you only care about Highway 22, and I only care about it from Monday through Friday between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m., and I only care if it's closed. I don't care if it's icy. I don't care if it's wet. I don't care about any conditions, right? I just care if it's closed. You could tell the system that, and you will only get notifications for that stretch of highway during those times for this certain condition. And it's it could take a little while to set up, plan on sitting down for about 30 minutes, picking highways and picking the times of day you want to get the notifications. But you just get a text on your phone and you're like, oh, it's closed. Okay, that's great. And now you know. Yeah, what's that?
I'm sleeping in today.
Yeah, or it's ski day. I can't get to work, but I could get to the ski hill. So, but yeah, so this is a really important one, I think, especially everybody in Wyoming drives long distances, and man, we all know what it feels like when you drive up and you see that gate closed, and you're like, how long am I going to be here? I wish I would have known. Or now that I'm here, I wish I'd get updates on whether they're going to have it closed for 4 hours or 14 hours. So that's the kind of stuff that you get from this.
Yeah, and the 511, I've installed the 511 app on my phone, and I use it a lot. Check out.
I would too. Man, I will say this app is incredible in it's really great in driving mode. So if you put it into that driving mode, it knows, once again, depends on whether you trust WYDOT and you want to let them know where you are, but it knows where you are, and it'll read you the conditions for the next stretch of highway that you're driving onto. So if I'm heading over to Riverton from Jackson and I'm going up over Togety, as I'm heading up Togety, as you hit these boundaries, it'll read you the road conditions for the next stretch. And especially if you're heading down I-80 and you're dealing, or even 25, but especially on 80, and you're dealing with the rolling closures, to be able to know ahead of time, hey, they're enacting a rolling closure in 2 hours, at Rollins, and you're like, I'm not going to make it there in 2 hours. I better, hold up here in Rock Springs or something.
Yeah.
That could be really important. and it gives you mileposts, which is super important. There's a where are you thing, and you just hit the button in the app and it'll tell you the highway name and the milepost. God forbid you ever have to call 911 and you're on a critical incident on the highway and there's no landmarks anywhere around you, most highways in Wyoming. This will tell you the milepost and they'll know exactly where you're at. So it's really useful for that.
Well, that's some features I haven't checked out yet, so I'm going to.
Oh, have
be
you
looking
checked
at
out the
those.
roadkill feature, Jeff?
Not intentionally.
Okay, there is a button. There is, and why dot worked with Game and Fish. There's a button where you can claim roadkill and get your tag through the app. So if you hit a porcupine on the way home from work today, you can have dinner.
Yeah.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Cool.
But the last thing I want to show you guys is weather. So if we look at FEMA app. FEMA has a mobile application, and this is the easiest way probably to get weather information directly from the National Weather Service. So the National Weather Service doesn't have their own app, but FEMA does, and you could get it on Google Play or the App Store. And you pick locations, you could pick up to 5, and it will send you real-time alerts for weather alerts. So if there's a blizzard warning in your area, flood watch, things like that, you could get those alerts as push notifications on your phone. And the FEMA app also gives you some really good tips for preparedness. Gives some preparedness articles and just a lot of really good stuff. I really like the app quite a bit. So for Take Action, we really want people to sign up for their local emergency alerts. So visit the Homeland Security website, hit those up, sign up for your road alerts through YDOT. Get to that 511 notify, this one down here. And then lastly, if you need weather alerts, a lot of people have their own weather app, but we really like the FEMA app. It actually works really well. So know your risk, figure out what's gonna impact you, make a plan for that, and then take action. Do something today to get you on your way to preparedness.
Perfect. I don't see any open questions. Abby, do you see any open questions?
I don't. I know that Jenny's been posting a lot of the links that Rich brought up, and so those are all available. A lot of the websites that he touched on, check on those. But no, I don't see any questions. So thank you very much for joining us today. I know that I learned lots and have some websites to check out, like Jeff mentioned, maybe some time to kill this weekend and sort of do some investigating on some of these websites. Very interesting.
The next time you get snowed in, Abby.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
As long as you have power and internet, you'll have entertainment.
But yeah, definitely. So thank you for coming on and sharing with us. We really appreciate it. And yeah, I don't see any other questions. So I think that Jenny will post a link for an evaluation or a survey in Zoom and on Facebook. And we appreciate it if people can fill that out for us. It just helps give guidance for kind of feedback on the next shows and what sort of topics that you'd like us to present on. So please fill those out. And then Jenny is pulling up our B&B homepage here. So these are all of our different articles that get posted, and she's hovering over the safety tab here. So lots of different information on safety, flooding resources. What else is here? And fire resources. So if you want to check out some more B&B resources, then there's stuff there on fire and flooding. Our next B&B live shows. So we're really just a few shows into this new season. So lots of shows to check out. Next week is still on our regular time on Friday. The week after that, there is a time change, but most of them are Friday at 10 o'clock. So tune in to those. If you can't make it, then the recording gets posted on YouTube, so you can check it out there. Is it okay? All right. So thank you for tuning in to today's show, and thank you, Rich, for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Rich.